We've got a little bit of breaking news just into us. Actually, right as we were walking into the studio, we found out that former President Trump has now formally and officially made a new legal filing. And this one is one he's been hinting about for days now after the search of his Mar-a-Lago home, in which the feds essentially retrieved 11 sets of classified material. He wants something called a special master. What is that, right? That's basically a third party that looks through what was taken. It's coming, as we're learning more now from the judge overseeing this case, that we might not get a lot of reasons as to the why of this search. Judge Reinhardt, Bruce Reinhardt, saying today that he's got to look and see if he's going to make any of this public once the government turns over its proposed redactions. You know, it's going to cross out stuff that's sensitive. The judge is essentially saying, hey, if too much of this is sensitive, if too much is blacked out, if it looks like some kid took a Sharpie and just scribbled everywhere, like it may be meaningless to actually release this to the public. Let me bring in now our reporter who is all over this story for us, and that is Ryan Riley. Ryan, let me bring you in first on this developing news, this special master. I want to note here that former President Trump, since Friday, has hinted his team would do this. His attorney went out on an appearance and talked about wanting to do this. And now they're backing it up with the paperwork. They actually have filed now for this third-party review. Talk about the significance.
Yeah, I think it's about 2 weeks too late. If the lawyers had been on top of the game, I think this would have been something that would have been filed immediately after the search was conducted, because the FBI team has already spent, now nearly 2 weeks,
Okay, so a federal appeals court just slammed Trump's legal team. A conservative federal appeals court, the 11th Circuit, just unanimously upheld nearly $1 million in sanctions against Trump and his former lawyer, Alina Habba. And the court didn't just uphold the sanctions. The court used harsh language about Trump's conduct. The court said Trump's lawsuit against Hillary Clinton should never have been filed. The court said many of the allegations in Trump's lawsuit were knowingly false or reckless. The court said Trump's legal theory had no realistic chance of success. The court said Trump and Habba engaged in bad faith litigation tactics. And this wasn't some liberal court. This was the 11th Circuit, a conservative appeals court, saying Trump's legal tactics were unlawful and abusive. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
It's something a message that is included in this lawsuit that was sent from one of President Trump's lawyers and delivered to a lawyer at the Justice Department on August 11th. And it's a very unusual message. And this was in the days after President Trump had ramped up a lot of message for a target in this instance of a ongoing criminal investigation to send to the Attorney General. I mean, obviously, he's the former president, so everything about this is a little bit unusual. But essentially what he's doing is taking advantage of a lot of that heat that he himself has caused within his...
Come on, are you kidding me? A conservative federal appeals court is calling Trump's legal tactics unlawful. That undermines Trump's narrative that only radical judges oppose him. That shows you that even conservative judges think Trump's legal strategy crosses the line. That shows you that Trump's lawyers were not just making legitimate legal arguments. Trump's lawyers were engaging in bad faith tactics. Trump's lawyers were filing cases that should never have been filed. Trump's lawyers were making false allegations knowing they were false or reckless. And this is not an isolated incident. This is part of a broader pattern where Trump-aligned lawyers have been caught misleading federal courts. Trump-aligned DOJ lawyers have been caught making false representations to judges. Trump's legal team has been caught pushing theories that courts say have no legal merit, and now judges are responding with sanctions, with potential discipline, with harsh language about Trump's conduct. Courts are essentially saying Trump's legal machine is not functioning as a legitimate legal operation. Trump's legal machine is functioning as a political weapon that crosses ethical and legal lines. Are you serious right now? A conservative appeals court just issued one of the harshest rebukes of Trump's legal strategy. The court said the lawsuit should never have been filed. The court said many allegations were knowingly false. The court said Trump and his lawyer engaged in bad faith tactics. And the court imposed nearly $1 million in sanctions as punishment. That's a serious judicial statement about Trump's conduct. That's a court saying Trump's legal strategy is not acceptable. So here's what's happening right now. Federal courts across the country are finding that Trump's actions are unlawful. Courts are finding that Trump's tariffs violate the law. Courts are finding that Trump's voting order violates the law. Courts are finding that Trump's legal tactics are bad faith and abusive. And courts are responding with sanctions, with rulings against Trump, with harsh language about his conduct. This is a moment where the judicial system is systematically rejecting Trump's legal strategy and his legal arguments. Okay, so let's dig into what the 11th Circuit actually found and understand why this appeals court ruling is so damaging to Trump's legal credibility. Because this is a conservative court, not a liberal court, saying Trump's legal tactics are unlawful and abusive. So let's look at the specific ruling and understand what happened and what it means. In November 2025, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals issued a decision about sanctions that a lower court judge had imposed on Trump and Alina Habba. The sanctions came from a lawsuit that Trump filed against Hillary Clinton and others. Trump's theory was that Clinton and her associates had conspired against him. Trump brought a sprawling lawsuit based on that theory, but a federal judge looked at the lawsuit and said this case should never have been filed. The judge said Trump's allegations were either knowingly false or recklessly made. The judge said Trump knew the allegations were baseless but filed them anyway, and the lower court judge imposed sanctions, nearly $1 million in penalties, against Trump and Habba for filing a baseless lawsuit. Trump and Habba appealed that sanction order. They asked the 11th Circuit to overturn the sanctions and say they were not appropriate. But the 11th Circuit unanimously agreed with the lower court. The appeals court said, yes, the sanctions are justified. The appeals court said Trump's lawsuit should never have been filed. The appeals court endorsed the lower court's finding that Trump and his team engaged in bad faith litigation tactics. And the appeals court used language that was particularly damaging. The court said Trump's legal theory had no realistic chance of success. That's judicial language for saying your legal argument is so weak it's frivolous. The court said Trump knew his argument was weak, but filed it anyway. The court said Trump's lawsuit was an abuse of the judicial process. So the 11th Circuit, a conservative appeals court, essentially said Trump was abusing the courts by filing a baseless lawsuit against a political opponent. And here's what makes this so significant. This was not a liberal court. The 11th Circuit is known as a conservative appeals court. The 11th Circuit has judges appointed by Republican presidents. But even this conservative court unanimously agreed that Trump's lawsuit was baseless and that sanctions were appropriate. That means Trump cannot claim that liberal judges are biased against him. Even conservative judges think Trump's legal tactics cross the line. And this ruling is part of a broader pattern. Across the country, federal courts are finding that Trump's actions violate the law. Courts are ruling that Trump's tariffs are illegal uses of emergency power. Courts are ruling that Trump's voting order violates the Constitution. Courts are ruling that Trump's legal tactics are bad faith and abusive. So it's not just one case or one judge. It's a systematic pattern where courts across the country are rejecting Trump's legal strategy. And then you've got the issue of Trump-aligned lawyers being caught misleading federal courts. Trump-aligned DOJ lawyers have been caught making false representations to judges. These lawyers have made arguments that they knew were false or misleading. These lawyers have pushed legal theories that courts said have no merit. And legal experts are now talking about possible discipline and disbarment for these lawyers. So it's not just Trump who is facing judicial criticism. Trump's entire legal team is facing scrutiny for misconduct. And here's what's important about the implications. If Trump's lawyers are engaging in bad faith tactics, if Trump's lawyers are making false statements to courts, then every case they bring becomes suspect. Every argument they make is subject to heightened skepticism. Every claim they file is going to be examined closely to see if it's another baseless lawsuit built on false allegations. So the sanctions and the rulings against Trump's legal team are damaging not just to Trump, but to the credibility of his entire legal operation. And courts are responding by being more aggressive in policing Trump's conduct. Courts are imposing sanctions. Courts are threatening disbarment. Courts are issuing harsh language about Trump's tactics. Courts are essentially saying, we are not going to tolerate this kind of abuse of the judicial process. We are not going to allow you to file baseless lawsuits against political opponents. We are not going to allow you to mislead courts. And if you try, we will respond with serious consequences. Okay, so let's break down what's actually happening with the 11th Circuit's ruling and why it matters so much for Trump's legal credibility and his ability to use courts as a political weapon. Because this is about courts drawing limits on how Trump and his team can use the legal system. So let's look at 3 key points that explain what's going on and what comes next. First point, A conservative federal appeals court unanimously upheld nearly $1 million in sanctions against Trump for filing a baseless lawsuit with false allegations. This is a real consequence imposed by a real court for real misconduct. The court said Trump's lawsuit should never have been filed. The court said Trump's allegations were knowingly false or recklessly made. The court said Trump engaged in bad faith litigation tactics. So Trump is facing serious financial consequences for abusing the courts. Second point, this is part of a broader pattern where federal courts are finding that Trump's actions violate the law and that his legal tactics are improper. Courts have ruled Trump's tariffs illegal. Courts have ruled parts of Trump's voting order unconstitutional. Courts have ruled Trump's legal team engaged in bad faith tactics. So courts across the country are systematically rejecting Trump's legal strategy. Third point, Trump-aligned lawyers are being caught misleading federal courts. And legal experts are talking about discipline and disbarment. This damages the credibility of Trump's entire legal operation. If Trump's lawyers can't be trusted to tell the truth in court, then every argument they make becomes suspect. Every case they file is going to be scrutinized. So here's what's really at stake. The question of whether Trump can use the courts as a political weapon or whether courts will enforce ethical and legal limits on his conduct. The 11th Circuit has essentially said Trump cannot file baseless lawsuits against political opponents. Courts will not tolerate that kind of abuse. Courts will respond with sanctions and harsh language. And here's what's likely to happen next. Trump's legal team is probably going to be more cautious about filing frivolous lawsuits because they know courts will respond with sanctions. Trump's legal team is probably going to face increased scrutiny because courts have lost trust in their representations. And Trump's ability to use courts as a political weapon has been significantly constrained by these judicial rulings. And here's what's important politically. This conservative court's ruling undermines Trump's narrative that liberal judges are biased against him. This shows that even conservative judges think Trump's conduct crosses the line. This shows that Trump's legal strategy is not just opposed by one ideological faction of judges. Trump's strategy is opposed by courts across the political spectrum. And here's what's significant about the broader implications. If courts are willing to sanction Trump for filing baseless lawsuits, if courts are willing to rule that Trump's actions are illegal, if courts are willing to police Trump's legal tactics, then Trump's power is being constrained by the judicial system. That's an important check on presidential power. That's an important enforcement mechanism for the rule of law. So the bottom line is this. The 11th Circuit Court of Appeals unanimously upheld nearly $1 million in sanctions against Trump for filing a baseless lawsuit with false allegations. The conservative appeals court said Trump's lawsuit should never have been filed and that Trump engaged in bad faith litigation tactics. This is part of a broader pattern where federal courts are finding that Trump's actions violate the law and his legal tactics are improper. Trump-aligned lawyers are being caught misleading courts and facing potential discipline. And courts across the country are systematically constraining Trump's ability to use the legal system for political purposes. This is a moment where the judicial system is enforcing limits on presidential power and holding Trump accountable for abuse of the courts. Stay tuned, because as courts continue to find Trump's conduct unlawful and continue to impose sanctions for legal misconduct, Trump's ability to weaponize the legal system is going to be further constrained, and his legal credibility is going to continue to erode.